Hello, and thank you for joining us for this special continuing coverage for former President Trump's fourth indictment. This one in Fulton County, Georgia, where the former president is set to surrender at the notorious Fulton County Jail any moment. This indictment brought forth by Fulton County DA Fani Willis, encompassing RICO charges, which have implicated many of the former president's advisors and legal counsel. Stay with us for the next 2 hours as we'll be following the former president as he gets set to be processed at the Fulton County Jail. Joining us now, we have Jesse Bunnell, Trump lawyer, Joshua Phillip, host of Crossroads on Epoch TV. Joshua, we're going to go to you first. What effect do you think these indictments will have on the 2024 race, but more importantly, on our country?
If anyone seems to be taking it pretty light, it's ironically Trump. If we watched his of course, interview with Tucker Carlson last night, there was something really interesting in it. Trump was asked by Tucker a couple times, in fact, do you think this will escalate? Tucker was suggesting that they've essentially attacked him in every way. He said, do you think they'll try to kill you? And Trump, in an interesting way, kind of downplayed that a little bit and then went into, I would say, what gives him hope. And I talked about this on my show earlier today. Trump is saying that polling data is showing that despite the attacks on him, people are rallying behind him. And it seems to be, based on his statements at least, that in his view, in Trump's view, people are smart. People see through it. The polling data does show this. Trump's winning more votes. I think in terms of his Republican contenders, he's left them behind in the dust. Whereas it looked at the beginning of all this like Trump would actually have some real challenges with them. He's leading by 40, 50 points depending on what poll you go by. In terms of the nation, I definitely think that maybe the first time people said, the first indictment, people said, well, Trump's getting indicted. Second indictment, they're like, something's a little fishy here. Third indictment, it turned into a scandal. And now fourth indictment, what I'm seeing is people are talking a whole lot more about corruption and prosecutorial misconduct and calling on Congress to act and saying this is ridiculous than they are trying to suggest that Trump is guilty of anything. I think we're at a point now where the charges themselves are just meshing together in people's minds, and people are just seeing what they view as just absolute corruption within the legal system. And for a lot of people, that's the way it's being interpreted. And I think polling data reflects that as well.
Jesse, we're going to get into the legal aspects in just a moment. Of course, we're going to get your perspective on it. But what do you think are some of the implications here beyond the legal aspects, just for our nation?
Well, that's an extremely important question right now. And it's a very dangerous time for our country because you see this politicalization of the justice system like we've never seen before in America. And it's very, very dangerous and sad that the founders actually had a phrase for trumped up political charges. They called them pretend offenses. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now is pretend offenses. These charges that we're seeing out of all four jurisdictions, none of these are legally based on any law being broken. It's all First Amendment protected activity or falls within the scope of the Presidential Records Act in the case of Florida. None of these are actually based on the law. And so when you have charges based on politics and not the law, this is something that our founders thought was so important to avoid that they put it in the Declaration of Independence. And the other thing that they put in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, specifically the First Amendment, is you always have a right to petition your government for redress of grievances. So for where that we see right now that I think our country is, it's very, very dangerous. And luckily, the one thing that President Trump pointed out that we can depend on at the moment is the American people to see through this. The American people know that this is an attempt for left-wing prosecutors and other people involved in the justice system to try to get around the ballot box, because Donald Trump right now is stronger in the polls than he was at any point in the 2020 election. He is looking very, very good right now to be elected again in 2024. And that scares the heck out of these prosecutors. And so all they can do is do everything they can to take him out of the picture in through the legal process instead of trying to fight him in an election.
It's very interesting commentary right there. And as you can see on the corner of the screen here, the main part of the screen, former president looks like he's just landed in Atlanta, where he will, eventually make his way in his motorcade to the Fulton County Jail to surrender, where he'll be processed. There's still the question of whether or not it's being reported that it's going to be highly likely this will be the first out of the 4 indictments where the former president will have a mugshot. There you can see Trump's airplane right there. Right now, guys, we're going to come back to the studio here in a moment, but we're going to right now go to NTD's Melina Wisecup. She's outside of the Fulton County Jail in Georgia with an update. Melina, what can you tell us?
Hi, Steve. So you can see right behind me, there is a massive presence of people here, both protesters as well as media outlets. Security has been hyped up just a bit. There are barricades lining the street. You can't really see it past those people, but those barricades line the entire street, and these supporters and protesters line the entire street going down. Security says that they're going to be ramping up the security protocols here once former President Trump does make his way to the jail. He says he will be here around 7:30. He posted that on Truth Social just late this afternoon. Now, these people are really anticipating this surrender by the former president. This is the first time, remember, that he has had to surrender to a jail in any of these indictments. He also is paying a $200,000 cash bail to get in and out rather quickly. We do expect it to be a rather quick process when the former president does make his way here, just based on what we've seen for all of the other co-defendants who have already surrendered. They came in, they had a cash bail agreement in place. They were in, they did have their mugshots taken, so that was interesting, and they were let out within just a couple of hours. Figures like Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Mark Meadows actually just surrendered today, which was quite interesting considering the fact that we didn't even know if Mark Meadows would be coming here to surrender because he is trying to move his case to federal court. Now, his lawyers did try to work to file motions to prevent the surrender this week because he does have a hearing on Monday about moving his case. The district attorney and the judge said no to him, so Mark Meadows did have to come here to surrender. Now, just remember what we're talking about. Trump is being charged with 13 charges, most of them of which are conspiracy charges. The district attorney here in Georgia, Fani Willis, accuses him of using illegal tactics to try to challenge the election results here in the state of Georgia. So the presence here has hyped up a lot, so people are, waiting by the barricades for the moment when the former president does come. We're not sure how he'll arrive, but whether it'll be in the air or coming through the street here, I would assume on the street considering the barricades here, but you just never know in these types of situations. But we are just standing by until that 7:30 time that the former president says he'll be arriving here. Steve?
And today's Melina Wisecup with a report from the Fulton County Jail in Georgia. Melina, we'll come back to you in just a little bit. Thank you for that update. In the meantime, guys, I want to bring the discussion back here with host of Crossroads on Epic TV, Joshua Phillip, and a Trump civil attorney in his civil matters, Jesse Banal. Thank you both for joining us here. I want to get your thoughts. Last night, Trump ran some counter-programming to the GOP debate, which is already losing air because of what we're talking about right now. During his interview with Tucker Carlson, which aired last night, Trump said that the indictments against him were both trivial and directly criticized Fani Willis, the DA in Fulton County. Let's watch part of what he said and get your reaction.
I got indicted 4 times. All trivia, nonsense, bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's horrible.
How do you do that? How do you get indicted, every week and stay cheerful?
It's, I think it's a lot easier because I'm so high in the polls, because it means the people get it. The people see it's a fraud.
Joshua, how does he stay so high in spirits under this type of a situation?
That is one of the things that makes Trump unique, because I don't think most people could, to be honest. I think most people you hit them once with a charge like this, and they'd probably fold, and they'd be so busy with their legal cases that they, at the very least, they drop out of the race. This is the fourth, and who knows if there's going to be more at this point. Trump seems like he's looking more at the reaction of voters than he is on the Democrats. And it actually reminds me of something he said when he announced his re-election campaign. He said when he announced his re-election campaign that he expected to be attacked. And to me, that suggests that Trump knew what he was walking into. His ongoing narrative has been that all of these attacks are about the election. This is the way these people are. This is corruption. In the episode we just watched with Tucker Carlson, he said that they are sick people. And that's the way he seems to genuinely view this. For him, this is the counter-election campaign. For him, this is the people he's running against. And for him, this is not really about any of the charges that they're trying to slap him with. This is just the way the system is that he's trying to show people and saying these problems exist. And I think people are watching an incredible, just live action, visceral display of everything he's warning about. I think for him, I think he genuinely believes this, that this is a pure example of the very thing that he's campaigning against and the very thing he's hoping voters realize exists. And when he sees the polls go up every time he gets indicted, for him, that's a sign of hope that people get it, and he's probably going to win, at least based on what based on his words.
Jesse, I mean, whether you love or hate the president, you know the president personally as a client. When you go to Mar-a-Lago, you see the life that he lives. He doesn't necessarily need to put himself through this. With that said, why do you think he does it?
Because he loves the American people, and he loves America. You can't be around him, and he doesn't when he doesn't bring up how much he loves this country and how disgusted he is with what the Biden administration is doing to this country. And he knows that he's in the best place to go up against these people and beat them. And we're really talking about this permanent government bureaucracy. The people that have been running D.C. during Republican administrations and Democratic administrations for years. And no matter which administration comes and goes, it's these permanent bureaucrats that always stay there. And they're the ones that really, for too long, have been running the show. And Donald Trump is the first one to ever stand up to them. And now they're trying to put him away for the rest of his life. And so he knows that because they're so determined to take him out of the picture means that he is on the right track, and he is in the best position to fight for the American people, to fight to give the American people the government that they were promised by the founders in the Constitution. And the unfortunate fact is in doing that, we've seen these permanent bureaucrats and left-wing radicals show their true color and try to drag America down into the depths of Marxism that unfortunately so many other countries have fallen into.
And for our viewers, as you can see on the screen here, former President Trump has landed in Georgia. We're waiting for him to exit his plane and make a departure toward the Fulton County Jail, where he will surrender and technically be arrested. In the meantime, if we could pull up CG3 here, and Joshua, I want to get your thoughts on the polling. After the fourth indictment, when it comes to Iowa, polls are coming out where the former president is gaining steam, and there he is right now. We'll take a look at him as he takes a walk down the steps to enter his motorcade. There you have former President Trump making way to surrender and be arrested, where he will likely have a mugshot, which will certainly be used in different ways after it is taken. There he goes right now into his motorcade. He did not talk to the press. We don't know if he will after, but there he is. We'll watch for a moment. Well, as the camera focuses here, we're kind of losing the photo. But anyway, Josh, What are your thoughts on some of this polling that we see coming out after this fourth indictment?
Well, I'll be honest, when Trump first announced his campaign, to be totally honest, I didn't feel that it had a lot of steam behind it. I saw him speak at CPAC. The crowd didn't seem that motivated, in full honesty. And I was actually wondering if the contenders against him actually had a serious shot. I mean, it was looking a bit like they did. DeSantis was generally pretty close. Some polls even put him over at first. And then the indictments started hitting and everything shifted. Trump shot up in the polls. Some even put him ahead of Biden. CNN recently was talking about this, in fact, suggesting on 3 different polls that he presents a serious threat to Biden, and this is, of course, based on their polls. Among the Republican candidates, Trump is, at this point, almost guaranteed to get in. I don't know what could possibly derail it. At this point, one of the questions even asked to his competitors within the Republican race, they were asked if they would still support him because they all signed the RNC pledge, and all but I think 1 or 2 said that they would support him, even though some, slowly raised their hands and said it. Ironically, I think these indictments, that these charges are helping him more than any of us could have foreseen. And I think if the intent really was to rig the elections against him, I think it's backfiring incredibly right now.
Jesse, how do you think tonight's surrender will ultimately help or hurt Trump's poll numbers?
If it's everything that's happened before, I think it's going to continue to help his poll numbers because it's going to galvanize the American people. And I think especially right now in the Republican Party, I think voters are saying that no matter what I may have thought about Donald Trump before, we cannot let these government bureaucrats and radical prosecutors determine who the next president's going to be. They're not going to take this away from the American people. So regardless of what I thought about Donald Trump before, now I definitely support him because we have to have a united front against these left-wing radicals that are going after him. So I think that the nomination is in the bag. I think, while you never want to be too confident, I think the American people know that yesterday we saw the vice presidential debate is really what that was. And then we saw the Republican nominee talking to Tucker Carlson. It's going to take something. Donald Trump is, I think, as strong as he's ever been because we see how unflappable he is. We see that no matter how much that they throw at him, he just keeps cool, calm, and collected, and keeps his sights on the main goal right now, which is giving this country back to the people.
Jesse, I just want to follow up with a legal question. 4 indictments, this isn't make-believe. As sometimes when we watch these things play out from afar, it almost feels like a fairy tale. You read some of these indictments and it feels like a mystery novel, but this is real life for the former president. He is facing, I believe it's 91 charges. And a lot of time in prison. So out of these 4 indictments, is there one in particular that stands out that may prove the most trying for the former president?
Well, no. All 4 are legally baseless, and so let's just talk about the 4 real quick. You've got New York, and you've got Alvin Bragg in a case that's been brought in front of a judge that's a Joe Biden donor. There is a real problem with whether Donald Trump can get a fair trial there, for sure, especially in Manhattan. But it's all based on the allegations that a non-disclosure agreement is somehow illegal, which is crazy. Non-disclosure agreements are something that people have in contract law and settlements and whatnot every single day in the legal community. And then you look at the case in Florida regarding his documents. And you have the fact that the prosecution has completely ignored the fact that presidents are legally entitled to review their records. And that's something that Congress specifically provided for, and the presidents are not subject to the Espionage Act. That's something that legally is very, very true. And then you have these kind of cousin indictments in both D.C. and Atlanta, where it's charging some sort of weird conspiracy to engage in protected First Amendment activity. And it's about as crazy as charging someone with an indictment, indicting somebody for going to church on a Wednesday instead of a Sunday, because traditionally church is held on Sunday. It's crazy. People always have a right to contest elections. Everybody has a right to ask government officials to do X or Y. That's something, again, that's the right to petition for redress of grievances. So each and every one of these cases is so legally baseless that it really shows you how clean a life Donald Trump has really lived, because this is the best they got, and it's nothing. They're just determined to follow the old adage from Stalin, that show me the man and I'll give you the crime. Except they haven't been able to come up with anything that's really a crime. So it's craziness.
Jesse and Josh, if you guys would stay with us, we'll be right back with more live coverage of this unprecedented indictment, the fourth one of former President Donald Trump. But first, we asked some Trump supporters outside of Fulton County about this latest indictment. Here's what they told us.
Trump can do international business well, and when he put those tariffs on China, made China back up. No, not that's my man. That is he knows the world system better than any of those guys.
We need this country saved. It needs to be saved right now, as everyone knows. Everyone can see, even though some won't admit it. It's going down and fast. So he has 4 years of proof that he can turn it around, and I believe he will. So my support for him is unwavering.
They're making the claim of illegality, and they never checked the reason that they're claiming the illegality. They're saying he questioned the election. So did we. We were up that night, and we watched the vote stop, and we're going, what's that all about? And then he was winning, or won at that point, and then it flipped when it came back, and we're looking, what happened? And we watched it in real time on the TV. The votes changed.
That was a shooting gallery up there.
I could hear the tremble in his voice.
She suffered a fairly severe beating, and the video is pretty graphic.
Justice for us seems almost impossible.
It's not fun to watch somebody die, and they knew she was in mortal peril.
They have not asked the hard questions. Why was the Capitol intentionally unsecure that day?
The FBI had information about security concerns before January 6th.
They're out for blood, and they're getting it. They appear to be winning.
Were the actions of the Capitol Police out of line? Were there violations in use of force?
Now I describe it as an inside job.
I'm ready to do whatever God calls me.
In every country communism gains power, authoritarianism and death followed in its wake. Communism promises a world without suffering, and yet, in its execution, does the exact opposite. Following Lenin's death, Stalin's 29-year reign killed an estimated 60 to 66 million people. More famines and purges would occur. The very peasants that communism was supposed to benefit instead starved to death under its rule. The party dictates what is right and wrong. Mao ended up killing between 50 million and 70 million people. As an investigative journalist, I want to understand why.
Welcome back to our live coverage as former President Trump makes his way to the Fulton County Jail to surrender and be processed with a potential mugshot. Joining us now is Horace Cooper, Senior Fellow with the National Center for Public Policy Research, Jesse Bunnell, Trump lawyer, and Joshua Phillip, host of Crossroads on Epoch TV. Thank you all for joining us again here. Excuse me, Horace, I'd like to bring you in here. Let's talk about this mugshot. This is different than the previous three indictments. What are the optics of this going to do? Is it going to wind up helping the former president or humiliating him?
Well, its purpose is to humiliate. There's absolutely no reason for a mugshot in a circumstance where the person in question is probably more well known than anyone else in America and maybe even globally. That's the purpose of a shot, is to make sure that we have an accurate record of who this person is. They know they don't need that. And it is intentionally a measure which the federal government recognized they didn't need to do it, and they didn't. Even New York State agreed that they didn't need to do this. It's pitiful and sad that the Fulton County Sheriff's Office and the court system is operating in this way.
Joshua, what do you think it's going to ultimately do?
Well, if you remember, the Democrats initially were against Trump having a photo taken. They were against a mugshot. And I mean, that alone could have been framed, at least in my opinion, as evidence that they were doing this for political reasons. When Trump was indicted in the other cases, they didn't book him like this. There was no photo taken. They were even suggesting that if they did take a mugshot, that they would not release it publicly because they were worried Trump was going to use it to campaign. I think it's going to backfire on them. And I think, again, even according to what other Democrats were saying when they were going after him, they didn't want this. And so it is strange that they're doing a 180 on this one.
Jesse, Josh says it's going to backfire on them. Do you see these turning into T-shirts and becoming ways to raise money for his campaign?
Well, I mean, I think that that's what should happen. I think that, again, this is an example of Donald Trump putting himself effectively in the line of fire. And so, yeah, Trump supporters are going to say that this makes them want to support him even more, and they'll wear that mugshot as a badge of honor. I saw people on social media today taking the format of the mug shots that have been used for other defendants and putting their own picture on it as a sign of solidarity, which I think is just excellent. A great way for us all to say that we're right there with you, President Trump, and the other defendants. And so I think it's going to have the absolute opposite effect that Fani Willis thinks it's going to have.
Horace, I want to get your thoughts on a lawyer change for Trump. Just hours before today's surrender, reports broke that Trump had replaced his top lawyer in Georgia, Drew Finding, with Stephen Sadow, an Atlanta-based criminal defense attorney. A Trump source told CNN that this was not about Finding's performance, his previous attorney, but the specific reason is not yet clear.
Well, typically what you want to do, whether it's a criminal case or a high-profile appellate argument, you want to get the type of person that members of the prosecuting team and the judge are not only familiar with, but they hold in high regard. This case in Georgia, as well as the other three cases, they are being followed extremely closely. And if you have a high-profile attorney raising objections that are ignored or just not given due consideration, it creates a record problem as the case or trial were to move forward. One of the things that we see in regular criminal court cases and, as I said before, appellate advocacy cases is judges understand that those experienced and highly regarded advocates are to be given a little bit more deference. We're not to just simply ignore them, and we trust that they're not going to be wrong on the law and they're not going to raise frivolous objections. So this is actually a very, very smooth, clever, and useful move on the part of the Trump legal team.
Joshua, how cautious do we have to be to some of these mainstream media narratives that come out, remembering back to the 4 years Trump was in office, that his whole staff was in chaos?
Well, you mentioned 4 years. I mean, how cautious have we had to been about the way the media frames these attacks on Trump from the very get-go? From the minute he went down the golden escalator, they've been attacking him. And as we've seen with just about every case previously, it turned out to be nothing. You know, they turns out now we know they fabricated the entire Trump-Russia narrative. They went after him on everything you can imagine. Remember, they were saying he was going to start a world war, nuclear war with North Korea. Next thing you know, he's in the DMZ shaking hands with Kim Jong-un. When he was meeting with Prime Minister Abe in Japan, they accused him of killing the koi fish for dumping the fish food in the water. Turned out they doctored the photo that they had finished, and both of them had done that. They'll lie about anything. And we've even seen the way they're trying to politicize these cases. Remember now, they didn't want the mugshot previously. They got mad at one of the artists in the courtroom for drawing Trump too well because they thought it made him look good. They didn't want to have these cases broadcast. It seems the Georgia case, they're throwing everything out. They're going to have the mugshot. They're going to allow media in there. And I don't think it's going to serve their interests, frankly.
Jesse, could it just simply have been as simple as the former president found a better attorney that's familiar with practicing law in Georgia?
Well, I mean, I think both these lawyers, in fact, everybody on his team in Georgia, in my experience, are excellent lawyers. And the one thing that I can say is that it's an embarrassment of riches for his legal team as opposed to Fani Willis and her lawyers in her office. They're going to be able to, as far as legal skill goes, they're going to run circles around Fani Willis's team, legally speaking. I've got no doubt about that. So the question is, can President Trump get a fair shake? And that's, I think, what we're going to see in these the days and weeks ahead here. We got some important things coming up, such as the removal hearing that is going to occur on Monday. That doesn't directly involve President Trump at this point, but involves Mr. Clark and Mr. Meadows, which I think is extremely important because it shows that when federal officials are acting in their official capacity, you can't simply have state actors that take and prosecute for them for that. That needs to go through the federal system, and eventually those cases need to be dismissed. So if there's a fair process, then we're going to see those cases dismissed, because this case is on all fours for that. It's I think the clearest example I've ever seen. And so we'll just have to wait and see on all that. But I'm very confident in this legal team in Georgia.
Horace, Jesse mentions Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who today asked the court to set an October 23rd trial start date for all 19 defendants. That's 4 months earlier than the date that she had originally proposed. She changed her mind after one of the defendants yesterday asked for a speedy trial. So, Horace, can you talk about the overall legal strategy by the Trump team and the prosecution side as well?
Well, I agree that this prosecution team is already over their head, but they are already behind the 8 ball. Here's the circumstance. You have so many defendants, and you have this multiplicity of charges, including the ability of these defendants to have their case removed. There is absolutely not going to be a circumstance. I can just promise you this: they're not going to let the judge in this case is not going to let every single one of the defendants all sit in the same courtroom all at the same time and have one trial. Possible that a person who's asked for a speedy trial may end up getting their trial to happen quick. But all that's going to do is show that Fani is not ready for prime time. Whenever you see a case where a defendant asks for their legally protected right to a speedy trial, they're asking the prosecution to put up or shut up. Show what you've got, straight. You have met all of your disclosure requirements, all of your Brady requirements. Let's get ready for trial. And then, if they're not ready, you'll see plea offers come forward. That's the advantage of one or two individuals asking for a speedy trial. I agree also that this removal statute, the federal statute that allows those individuals who are operating while they are federal office holders to be able to have their case heard in federal court, is very likely to have a significant impact on the ability of this prosecutor to be able to make her case. Her case isn't really solid in the first place because she's going to have to show us that besides public advocacy, besides contacting elected officials, besides insisting to the world that he carried the state and that only because of unlawful behavior was he denied, they really have to show people sat down, agreed to a conspiracy, show who those conspirators were and what are the actions. You don't get to show with a bank robbery case that so-and-so Joe showed up at the bank 6 times in the months leading up to the bank robbery as evidence of that person's conspiracy to participate in a bank robbery. You absolutely are going to have to show something of substance. And in this case, it appears that the primary
So Horace, I'm just going to jump in here. Horace, I apologize to cut you off here. I just wanted to bring it to our viewers' attention. I don't know if they could see, but as Horace was talking, there was a camera following Trump's motorcade. It lost connection, apparently, when he entered into the premises, likely going underground into the facility there. So the former president has entered the grounds at the jail. He is, set to be booked and processed, and that's where he's going to likely have his fingerprints taken, or maybe not, in a mugshot. So Jesse, we're going to actually get your thoughts here. What should we expect right now as the former president sits inside of this Fulton County jail?
Well, I mean, this is, I think, a very different process than what we've seen in for instance, in the federal courts actions and in the New York court actions. It's something that Georgia has a little bit of a quirk in their system where instead of going to the court for an arraignment in your initial hearings, you actually are booked in the jail facility there. And so they'll go through their booking processes as well. It is something that I believe was negotiated very carefully with the Secret Service because, of course, the Secret Service is bound to always have him in a secure location, in a secure way to make sure that he can't be harmed by others. I mean, of course, you can imagine that one of the most notorious jails in the country is not an easy thing for the Secret Service to be able to secure. I think this is one moment where we really need to appreciate the important work that the Secret Service does in protecting, presidents and former presidents. They really do put their life and their safety on the line, and that's something where I think this photo op that Fannie wanted so badly to have him book through this process really did nothing to advance her cause. All it really did is make a nightmare for the good men and women of the Secret Service. And so it's just, again, an entire circus that they have going on in Atlanta that was all so unnecessary and avoidable.
Yeah, and as you can see there on the screen, the aerial footage of Trump's motorcade looks like there's a little bit of an overhang there where the former president's vehicle may be parked as he walks in and enters. So Joshua, just to go back to what we were talking about, how do you see this playing out in terms of Trump's legal team and their strategy?
Well, a few things on this. First of all, Trump is a former president of the United States, not to mention one of the leading political candidates. He's going to have Secret Service detail with him. It's going to be a constitutional crisis if they try to hold him in there. It wouldn't surprise me if Trump said, hey, I'm not going to pay the bail. Let's see you try to keep me here, because it would initiate a constitutional crisis. They couldn't do it. And if they did try to do it, I mean, we've never been here before as a nation. It would bring up a whole nother slate of legal issues that would be a nightmare for probably the folks trying to bring these charges against him. When they released the indictment, the entire world got to see it. The entire world got to see the charges against Donald Trump. Oh, he said he was watching TV. Oh, he made fun of Mike Pence. The nature of the charges and the accusations they're bringing against him were ridiculous. And I think especially when they go to discovery, which is what, I mean, maybe that's why they're trying to rush it through, it's going to be really problematic for them, because it's even going to have to not only prove that Trump actually believed that, for example, the elections were not rigged, which I think is going to be a hard case to make. It's also going to go into the beliefs of other people who are making their claims, including, for example, Mike Pence, and whether he believed he did not actually have the legal right to, for example, send the votes back on January 6th, which he's given public statements where he's suggested otherwise. The entire thing is going to be very, very difficult for the prosecutors and for the people trying to bring this case against him.
So, Horace, are there any parallels or past precedent for certain high-profile cases like this that there are any similarities we can draw upon?
Well, this is really ahistoric. I would argue that if a prosecutor were serious about accountability and the rule of law, make sure he had an ironclad case to present. Many nonpartisan legal critics have looked at this particular indictment, and they've been disappointed at its lack of seriousness. It appears that it's precisely because of the prosecutor's lack of a lengthy experience as a prosecutor that a very, very weak case was brought forward, and one that normally the senior prosecutor, if the junior prosecutor brought that forward, would say, okay, well, we don't really have enough here, and we're just not going to go forward with it. Unfortunately, that didn't happen here. So that makes it ahistoric.
So as we've been watching here on the screen, the aerial view, former President Trump making his way inside of that Fulton County jail, the notorious jail, where we actually have NTD's Melina Wisecup there with an update. Melina, if you could just kind of give us an idea, what have you seen when the former president rolled through? Well, Melina, looks like she's not with us right now, but we'll go back there as soon as we get her. Joshua, I mean, right now you see what's happening here. The optics, it can go, depending on, if you're split down partisan lines, Republican or Democrat, the optics can go either way.
Well, let's look at what's happening right now. One thing I found very interesting that's different in this presidential race than in 2016 is that Donald Trump has been deplatformed. Donald Trump is no longer on Twitter. Donald Trump is no longer being aired on just about every major news station. Remember in 2016, there were even communications of the Hillary Clinton campaign suggesting they wanted the establishment to broadcast him because they didn't think he could win. They thought it was their way of getting someone who couldn't win against Hillary. And all their polling data showed it. This time around, they've pushed him off most of the major networks. The entire corporate press, for the most part, will not air Donald Trump's public statements or his speeches or his campaign messages, generally speaking. But they will be airing this. Now, Donald Trump's supporters seem to be galvanized behind him, and he's winning ground with a lot of them. He's also winning ground with moderates. You've even heard, for example, there's news stories right now that quote-unquote non-white voters are gravitating towards Trump. And the establishment seems very unhappy about this. The only people then who are going to be won over, or maybe, we'll see how they go, are the ones voting for Biden currently. And they would not have been exposed to even hearing what Donald Trump had to say were it not for these indictments, in my opinion.
So, Jesse, back to some of the legal implications here. The former president has not made a motion to remove the case out of the state court in Georgia. There's been some discussion about that. Do you anticipate that happening?
I would think, and I'm of course not on that legal team, but I would think that is something that they should do. I think that you do want this in the federal system, where the courts there are in the best place to dismiss this case based on immunity under the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution. So that is something that should happen. We'll see what it does. There's also going to be some very good issues on the motion to dismiss that I think that we're going to see in this case. Not only do we have like the freedom of speech issues that we talked about, the right to petition your government for redress of grievances, but there's also going to be the issues that their reading of the law in this case is so flimsy that even if these were criminal offenses, which of course they're not, it would render these statutes unconstitutionally vague and overly broad. And the idea behind that is that you need to have criminal statutes that clearly put people on notice about what is lawful and what is not lawful. And if it's so vague that you don't really know what activity is lawful and not lawful, well, then you can't be held responsible for it. And that's especially true when it comes to issues of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and the right to petition your government for redress of grievances. Because one thing that the founders were very, very concerned about was chilling effects, was the ability of the government to essentially encourage people not to engage in their First Amendment rights because, well, Group A, we're going to let them get away with it, but Group B, if you try this, we're going to throw you in jail. That's something that the founders were very, very concerned about, and that's exactly what we're seeing here right now. So there's some very, very good motions that I think you're going to see from this legal team coming out, and this is a case that if there's a fair judge, I mean, it's a case that should be dismissed very easily and early, just like the case in D.C.
Thanks, Jesse. So I understand we do have our reporter on the scene there, Melina Wisecup, at the Fulton County Jail with an update as former President Trump is inside right now. Melina, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Steve, like you mentioned, the former president did make his way inside the Fulton County Jail just moments ago, and he didn't come through this Rice Street entrance, which is right behind me. This is where all the supporters gathered. This is where the majority of the media has gathered. He entered through a different location about less than half a mile down the road called Jefferson Street. There was less media over there, less space, but it was a more secure location, so that might be why Secret Service chose to take him to that location. The one interesting point, though, is that former President Trump did tweet Truth Out earlier today, or actually yesterday, about the rally here at 10 a.m., which is the reason why all of these Trump supporters gathered here at this location, because this was the address that Trump put on that Truth Social about where the rally would be. So they're all waiting here to see him. Unfortunately, they missed him. He went in the separate entrance where there was much less people. He may have been just trying to make a point here and try to rally all of these supporters here to just make a point to both the media as well as these local law enforcement officials that there are still people that do support him, even as he's coming here to surrender to those 13 criminal charges. Now, as you've mentioned throughout the show, the former president may have a mugshot. He does already have a $200,000 cash bail, which is the first time he will have to pay a cash bail in any of these indictments. As for the mugshot, though, we will have to wait and see what happens when he comes out, because although all the other co-defendants did have a mugshot taken, the former president is essentially different because he does have Secret Service protection. So when you check back in with us, we'll see if he came out this entrance over here on Rice Street to wave to some of his supporters, or he went over there to Jefferson Street where he entered, where there is much less of a personnel presence. Steve?
Melina, thank you so much for that report. Back to the studio here. So, Horace, I want to get your thoughts. Melina there in a report mentioned the former president's going to have a $200,000 bail. We saw Rudy Giuliani going to a bail bondsman. Are we going to see the former president on his way to a bail bondsman?
Well, I doubt that. But I do think it's telling and how many of the sort of expectations of a legitimate criminal justice system, how it would operate, are being ignored. One of the things I wanted about the notice, because I do think the law ought to provide notice to individuals about what they should do to comply with the law. Novel interpretations make notice much harder. So here you have a mugshot that's going to be done. You've got bail that's going to be done. You've got this, we're going to do the booking inside the jail. All of these things were not necessary, were not essential, and in fact, both strain the Georgia state resources as well as the federal government's resources while they follow all of these types of machinations. And one quick point, Mark Meadows' case on removal, how that ends up going is going to tell us a lot about what the strategy likely will be with the Trump people. If the Meadows case is removed fairly quickly and then moves towards dismissal, I imagine that you're going to see almost the same process. But I also say that if the removal takes a while, there are a number of legitimate motions that could be filed in state court before this case can even go forward.
The control room could cue the mugshot CG. I want to get Joshua's thoughts as we're, unpacking all of this and unpeeling this, and you think about, this group here with their photos being marched through. These are, attorneys. These are former government officials, a former chief of staff to a president, mayor of New York City, America's mayor, as he was once called. It does raise the question of the optics of this. You saw Rudy Giuliani going to the bail bondsman.
Well, it's interesting because we should look at this not even just as a U.S. issue at this point, but instead an international issue. You have the president of Mexico criticizing America for being politically corrupt. You have the Russian government criticizing America of being politically corrupt. You have the Chinese Communist Party criticizing America of being politically corrupt. And, a lot of people would suggest, if you believe that the narratives in this level, that when you get to the real interests in Washington, a lot of it has to do with foreign relations. When it begins damaging the very image of the United States and the narrative on which we base our diplomacy, the narrative on which we base the idea of the American idea and what we represent for the world, the very basis of the Pax Americana, these images are a banner now for every corrupt regime on the face of the planet to parade in front of all their constituents and all the people in those countries the new image of America, that this is what America does to its political enemies. This is what happens if you go against the system that they claim exists in this country of corruption. And this is what they will use as the excuse when they abuse their own people and when they target their own political enemies. This is going to be damaging to the United States on a level of which we cannot yet even begin to calculate. And I believe that on basic diplomacy issues, on trade issues, on human rights issues, this is going to be something very damaging for the Biden administration. I think they're going to have to question whether it's even worth it, the amount of harm they're going to be causing to the United States diplomatically, let alone domestically, and the image it projects to Americans. This is the new campaign image. You're looking at right now at the new campaign banners, the T-shirts, the flyers, the flags, the images that are going to be plastered everywhere, and that are really going to be called, I think, considered historical, symbolic images of everything that's gone wrong. At the very least, that's the way that Trump supporters are going to be using them, and that's the way that many countries in the world are going to be using these images.
Jesse, Joshua makes a really powerful point. What do you think are the international implications when you do have some of these autocracies looking into the United States that are, masters of propaganda?
Well, I think Josh is exactly right, and we've lost all moral authority in the world if we do not take and fix this. And that's why I think one of the really important things that happened today is that Jim Jordan and his committee are now investigating Fannie Willis, and they need to continue to also investigate the other prosecutors involved in this as well. We need to have congressional action to make very, very strong legal changes that make it so that political prosecutions in this country are not only illegal, which they already are. It's already a violation of civil rights under color of law. It's already a federal offense. But it needs to be a much harsher penalty for prosecutors that engage in this behavior, and we need to have accountability. At the end of the day, it is extremely important that these prosecutors face justice for what they've done for destroying America's moral authority in the world.
So Horace, with a world that we seem to be living in with so much relative subjectivity in interpretation, different interpretations, how easy do you think it will be to ultimately prove what Jesse is talking about?
Well, I think the left, by endorsing these types of actions, there has been no prominent liberal, except for perhaps Professor Alan Dershowitz, who has denounced this sort of behavior that we're witnessing. It's lawfare, and it's an attempt to change.
Horace, I apologize. I have to cut in on you again here. The former president is now departing. He's departing the Fulton County Jail, where we're being told that he did have a mugshot. The former president, 45th president of the United States now, 4 indictments in. This is the 4th one. The previous 3, no mugshot. This one, we're being told you will start to see the former president's mugshot circulated. It will join, the list that we've put up on our screen before with the CG. With he'll be joining former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, his attorneys Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell, and others. So the former president right now leaving the Fulton County Jail as we speak, excuse me, where he's set to head off to the airport. We don't know yet. He may give a speech, he might not. We're going to follow the motorcade here. We're going to bring you the latest as he departs the Fulton County Jail where the mugshot was taken. Horace, I'll come back to you now. I apologize.
No worries. I was just about to make the point, however, that history gives us some information. Talking about centuries-old history, I'm talking about 2016. I remember when there was an ongoing effort to make electors become faithless, get them to change the vote and thwart the will of the states where they resided. There were significant pressure campaigns. There's been no indictment. There were also so-called voter agreements, which appear to me to at least not in keeping with the notion of self-government. And these voter agreements were that if you would agree to vote against Donald Trump in your state as a voter, I'll vote in my state a certain way on issues that mattered to you. Our system is state by state, we hold elections. Again, when these mechanisms were openly discussed on social media, I didn't see prosecutors announcing that they were going to hold this kind of behavior. It was looked upon as maybe mere extra political enthusiasm that was taking place. There was a real risk that the Electoral College vote in 2016 might have changed as a result of this influence. We know in 2020, no change in the electoral vote occurred. How is it now it's the prosecutor, then the public open effort that went underway was completely ignored and treated as benign?
Can I jump in on that real quick?
So, Joshua,
if I can just jump in and just add one thing, because I think those are some very good points, and I'll say that bribery is giving someone something of value for their vote.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so when they were giving people something of value for their vote, saying that I will vote for candidate X if you vote for Hillary Clinton instead of the Jill Stein, that was bribery. And likewise, in the elector case, they successfully got 10 electors to change their vote in the electoral college vote. So that was an actual case where 10 electoral votes were actually changed. No charges of any of that. It really does show the two systems of justice in our country.
Joshua, to Jesse's point, and Horace, Alan Dershowitz, to mention him again, he talked about the 2000 race with Al Gore, where he did a very similar thing that these attorneys have done for Trump, yet with very little fanfare.
Well, I'll be totally honest. I think the Democrats better hope that no Republican ever comes into office ever again, because what they're doing right now is they're setting some really serious legal precedents. If you look at what they did, not only with the electors and getting them to switch their votes, which the Democrats did in fact do, the media was involved in it, many members of Congress were involved in it. You even had, like, if I remember right, like a lot of actors and otherwise, a ton of people were involved in it. And if they want to call that racketeering, a RICO case, that there was some kind of broader conspiracy, you could wrap up a whole lot of people in the conspiracies then and the conspiracies that followed. For example, the text messages of their quote-unquote insurance policy against Donald Trump if he were to win. For example, the creation, dissemination, and the use of fake information, being the Trump-Russia scandal, to try to prevent Trump from getting into office in the first place, to open investigations into his campaign, and even try to remove him from office when he was still president. What do you call it when you have the intelligence community working together with politicians and the media to try to remove a sitting president from office? You call that a coup d'etat. That was actual insurrection, a real case of actual insurrection. And if you want to talk about RICO and racketeering, a conspiracy to carry that out, they did that. And if you take that in context of everything else we witnessed, they have done just about everything they've accused him of doing.
Yep.
And if we want to see now legal precedents come back and bite them, that ammo is sitting around now. This is there now, not to mention the classified documents and everything else.
Unfortunately, guys, we're out of time for this segment. Horace Cooper, Jesse Bunnell, Joshua Phillip, thank you guys so much for your perspective. Please stay with us. We'll come back with another panel in just a moment.
For the first time in history.
Public will see here as a former president is now indicted.
Did he do something wrong? What was it? His liberty is at stake.
But if this is about the 2016 presidential election, how could Bragg, a local prosecutor, prosecute a federal offense? Do we still have consistent accountability, or has our justice system become a partisan tool?
Officers were injured, but you've heard nothing about that on mainstream media. And I said, are you going to treat these two cases the same? He refused to answer my question, said he hadn't even heard of or knew that the Department of Interior had been raided.
If it could happen to us, it could happen to you.
Physical assassinations are much messier these days, so you assassinate by narrative.
There was a time in America when both parties were patriotic. Your efforts were to win a general election, not to put the opposition in jail or ruin them financially or destroy them.
Perhaps what we need is a rebirth of our nation, a return to the moral values and principles upon which it was founded. Only by embracing these values can we hope to move forward and secure the future of our great nation.
I've stated multiple times that if laws were broken, then people that broke those laws need to be held accountable. But there shouldn't be, we're going to have one standard for January 6th people who walked into the Capitol, and we're going to have another standard for those liberal environmentalist activists who stormed the Department of Interior. I held up a picture in a Judiciary Committee hearing and asked AG Garland that specific question. Here's a picture of January 6th. Here's a picture of leftist environmentalists storming into the Department of Interior. Officers were injured. Officers had to go to the hospital. You've heard nothing about that on mainstream media. And I said, are you going to treat these two cases the same? He refused to answer my question, said he hadn't even heard of or knew that the Department of Interior had been raided.
Federal building, would you call both of these acts domestic terrorism?
Look, I'm not going to comment about particular matters.
And as we sit here today, we all know what's happening with the January 6th people. But nothing has happened to any of these individuals after asking repeatedly to this DOJ.
The stories that need to be told, the voices that need to be heard, the truth that you need to see. Get unbiased and in-depth news. Don't miss a beat. I'm Stephanie Cox at MTV. We're here for you.
Welcome back to our special live coverage where former President Trump has just left the Fulton County Jail where he was processed, arrested, and from what we're being told in reports, a mugshot was taken. Right now we're going to go to the scene of the jail. NTD's Melina Wisecup is there for us with a report. Melina, what are you hearing?
Hi, Steve. Yeah, so as you just mentioned, the president was in and out very quickly, just as we expected. We're unsure about that process, though. We are seeing these reports, just like you are, that a mugshot was taken. We did see a photo. However, later we were told by our advisors that actually that might have been a fake one that was photoshopped, and that spread so quickly. So you can just see how quickly fake information spreads. He was wearing reportedly a different tie in that fake mugshot than he was today when we saw him getting off his airplane. Now, as for what's next in this case, the former president has replaced his lead lawyer in the case. Now we're going to be looking to see how he handles it. What's their legal strategy here? One thing that's interesting to me is the fact that he didn't quickly move to try to move this case to federal court like Mark Meadows, considering Mark Meadows did this on the grounds that he was an acting official at the time that these actions took place. The former president also has the same standing here because he, of course, was sitting in the White House at the time that these actions took place. However, we did report earlier last week that their legal strategy may be something to do with or at least part of their legal strategy, maybe something to do with the charges that were leaked on the website. The district attorney's office released charges that released all of the charges against former President Trump on their website before the grand jury even voted on the indictment. Later, his former lead lawyer in this case posted saying that this is an example of prosecutorial misconduct. So there are some speculations that his lawyers could be trying to use this leakage as a way to undermine the district attorney's indictment here. So these are some of the things that we will be looking at. Trump today, his lawyers did oppose that October 23rd trial date that was set forth or proposed by the district attorney's office. This was after one of his co-defendants requested a speedy trial in this case. So Trump's lawyers are now filing a motion to the court saying that they don't want to be connected with any filings from any of the co-defendants if they have to do with a speedy trial or moving up that trial date at all. So these are some of the few areas that we will be looking at as this case moves forward. Steve?
Melina, appreciate that report right in front of the Fulton County Jail. And now joining us, we have Angie Wong, political journalist and columnist, David Gelman, criminal defense attorney, who's also former deputy district attorney in the state of New Jersey, and William Jacobson, clinical professor of law and the director of securities law clinic at the Cornell University. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
I'd like to go to you first, William. If you could just give us your thoughts right now as you see the former president leaving the Fulton County Jail.
Well, obviously, this is unprecedented. It is in many ways a sad day, particularly, and I think you know my views on this, that I don't think the charges, the RICO charges, justified here. But if it was, it should have been brought a year ago. We should have been through this process. We should not have a major political candidate, the leading candidate so far in the Republican Party, being arraigned on the eve of the primary season. This is complete political interference by not just this prosecutor, but others. This should have been done a year and a half ago.
Angie, this is the fourth indictment. Former president leaving right now after being booked. This one seems to have sort of a different feel to it than the others. I don't know if it's because of the nature of the RICO statute, where you have multiple co-defendants. What is your assessment?
Well, this particular case has 19 defendants. We've never seen a case like this before. How are you going to get 19 defendants and all of their lawyers are all going to have 3 to 4 lawyers each into a courtroom? You're going to need to have a football stadium to host this case. And, you know, this one definitely feels different from the other ones. The other ones you can almost dismiss. Certainly the New York case with Alvin Bragg, that one was very lightweight. You have some other ones that are much more substantial, like the Mar-a-Lago case, where there are actual documents to be admitted as evidence. This particular one is, they're trying to round up all of Trump's troops so that they can no longer investigate what was happening in Georgia in 2020 and for the 2020 election. And this one feels more of a just a roundup of all of his officers. And that's why I think that this one has a lot more weight because of all the people involved. This is a name and shame and smear campaign by the district attorney. And I was listening to your report earlier. I think that's exactly right. They should keep it in the state courts because there were so many mistakes that were made early on that there was probably going to be a much more higher bar to dismiss this case.
David, to Angie's point, I want to get your thoughts on the fact, the RICO nature of this and how certain motions, say, for instance, you have Mark Meadows or Jeff Clark filing to dismiss the state level case, how that can actually affect everybody's case. How does that complicate things or actually help things?
Well, it all depends on what all the attorneys are going to be trying to do. Now, if I'm Trump's attorney, obviously I'm going to be the main cog in this whole thing. So everybody should really be planning around what Trump's attorneys are going to be doing. And frankly, they all have to take a back seat to Trump's attorneys, as it should be. So what's going to happen, in my opinion, is Meadows and the other attorney, the other co-defendant, their attorneys already filed the motion. I have a feeling that now that Trump has a new lead attorney here in the Fulton County matter, that they have to get together with Trump's new attorney. And again, most likely Trump's attorney is going to be filing the motion to dismiss. Probably every other attorney is going to be as well. But if that is not successful, then everybody is going to have to line up in back of Trump's attorneys, and everybody is going to have to take their cue because, President Trump, he's the number one guy in this, and it's all going to be dictated on what he does.
William, to David's point, why no motion from the Trump team yet on this? Is it strategic? Is it potentially an oversight? Would it ultimately be easier to transfer the entire case to the federal court?
Well, that may end up happening. I mean, this is not something that is usual, but we have been looking into it, and the law is not crystal clear, but if Mark Meadows is successful, it's entirely possible that the entire case will be pulled up to federal court. Donald Trump, I think, has 30 days from this arraignment to file his motion to remove to federal court. So there's no rush for him to do it. He could wait and see how the judge rules with Mark Meadows. Perhaps that might inform him as to what motion he's going to file. So I don't think there's a super rush there. And particularly if Donald Trump doesn't want a quick trial, doesn't want a trial before the 2024 election, the longer it takes for this to get to federal court, the more likely it is that he'll be able to get that delay. So I don't think he had any time pressure. And his lawyers, particularly since he's switching lawyers, may want to just wait a little bit and see what happens in federal court on Monday.
William, thank you so much for that assessment. Right now, as you can see on the screen here, the camera's a little bit unstable. The former president seems to have arrived at the airport. Last indictment, I know we're all losing track at this point. He did say a few words, and we're just waiting right now to see if he will speak to the press. Right now, it looks like he is parked. right in front of his airplane. And like I mentioned last time, he did, after being indicted, make some statements, and it's moving up here right now, and we're carrying this feed right now to bring you the latest. We're watching very closely here as the former president has just been arrested in the Fulton County jail and is awaiting to board his airplane. And we're just seeing here if he's going to speak to the press. In the meantime, Angie, I'll bring you back in here. What do you make of the optics of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, this is the election, guys. This is election 2024. We're watching it unfold. There is no campaigning. There's no kissing babies. There's no talking about real American issues. There's no talking about how eggs are $1 a piece and gas is going back up to $5, $6 a gallon. This is the election. And what's scary is that this is a Democrat-driven narrative that we're all playing in. This is from their script. They wanted Trump entangled in multiple cases and basically in court pretty much the entire election season. He's not doing his rallies. He's not going up to all the key states that he needs to be in to basically get the votes for the primary. That's what he should be doing right now. And campaigning has completely flipped on its head. On the flip side of this, you have Joe Biden, who's sitting on a beach for most of the summer. And he's getting work done by the beach. He's inviting world leaders to join him at the beach. It's a really strange season. And you know, being from campaigns, I can see why they're doing this, because there's already a lot of election engineering happening. This is a math game, ultimately. It's about votes, it's about registering voters, and it's going to be about mail-in ballots, drop boxes, and all those things that we were talking about just last election. So all of this is a great distraction from what's really happening, which is Democrats are signing up new voters.
Angie, the former president is getting out. I'm just going to cut you off. It looks like he's about to approach the press right here, so we're going to bring you this live.
Being here, I really believe this is a very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election. And I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same thing, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Stacey Abrams or many others. When you have that great freedom to challenge, you have to be able to, otherwise you're going to have very dishonest elections. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. I've never had such support. And that goes with the other ones too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning. And this is one instance, but you have 3 other instances. It's election interference. So I want to thank you for being here. We did nothing wrong at all. And we have every right, every single right, to challenge an election that we think is dishonest, that we think it's very dishonest. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you very much.
Did you pardon yourself? President.
How is this different from the previous time?
There you have former President Trump approaching the media with a brief but rather powerful statement where he said that this was a travesty of justice and said that it's his right to challenge an election, and he's doubling down on it. He doesn't seem to waver. Angie, what do you make of what the former president just said?
Exactly right, and it was very concise. Look, I actually know a lot of the people who are being indicted, and certainly know a lot of those are unnamed and unindicted on the same case. I will tell you, I've read through the indictments. They're being indicted for campaigning. This is exactly what you do on a campaign. You go on social media, you put your thoughts on, you go and make phone calls, and you text message, right? This is their case. And it's unfortunate that my friends are being prosecuted for basically doing their job as campaigns. Now, you know, I can understand that Fani Willis is basically looking at all this through her lens, which is prosecute Trump. And at the same time, she's also campaigning. She's looking for a re-election. We're going to see with the files how much money she's made just on the news of her prosecuting Trump and his team. But she's certainly raised millions in the last week based off the news that she's being, the lead, indictment for all this in Georgia. So this is a sad part of campaigning and where we are in the campaign season now. It is about fundraising. It is about being the newsmaker, and it's also positioning yourself for possibly a cabinet seat in the Biden administration. That's what we're seeing.
As you can see here on the screen, the feed still former President Trump's airplane getting ready to take off. That's after the former president just gave a few brief comments to the press regarding the situation, the indictment that we see here. You can see members of his team, Secret Service, boarding the plane right now. William, I want to get your thoughts. Former president there just doubling down, saying that the election was rigged and stolen, and he also invoked Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams.
Yeah, well, that's been the issue from the start. Trying to contest and overturn an election is not itself a crime. It's permitted. It's, did you do illegal acts towards that end, which is the question. And what they've done with this RICO charge, particularly in Georgia, and the conspiracy charges in DC, but we're talking about Georgia now, is they've taken the potentially criminal acts of other people. There's allegations someone impersonated a public official, somebody tried to get improper access to a computer. Those could be crimes, and you should prosecute those people for those crimes. But because their target is Donald Trump, they're wrapping this into a RICO indictment and trying to hold him responsible for the actions of other people. And that's really the problem here. There is nothing wrong with trying to contest an election or trying to, quote unquote, overthrow an election. It's been done many times. It's been done by the Democrats. Every time this century that a Republican has won, they've tried it. There's nothing in and of itself illegal. Tell me, what is the illegal thing that Donald Trump did? And then maybe this indictment will have more credibility. But you can't just say, well, he tried to overturn an election, because that's not in and of itself illegal.
David Gelman, I want to get your thoughts on the former president's statements. Himself basically flipping the script and calling these indictments election interference, which raises the question if, the former president, he is the front runner right now for 2024. If he does get elected, what might that mean for those who are prosecuting him?
That is going to be a very interesting question, Steve. We have never had this ever in American history, where a potential sitting president is indicted and would be potentially going to a trial. Number one, it can't happen. Just can't. As the president, you are the commander in chief. Your job is to protect the country. All right. So you cannot be dealing with indictments. So that would all have to be on the back burner for 4 years. It has no choice. But this is just unprecedented times. Other countries are looking at us right now like we are a banana republic, and we really are, because seeing an individual challenge a election is it's American. This is what you're supposed to do. In fact, it's very interesting. Doing a little research today before coming on your show, I saw a tweet from 2020 on Election Day from Fani Willis. And do you know what she was talking about? She was saying, we have to be sure that Fulton County, our elections are secure. And she's questioning the integrity of the elections. So she is doing exactly what Donald Trump was doing and all the individuals that are working for him and his campaign. Trump didn't do anything wrong in this. There's no RICO racketeering or conspiracy to do anything. Questioning an election is not illegal. It's American.
Angie, House Republicans today launching an investigation into the Fulton County DA, Fani Willis. Congressman Jim Jordan now asking for documents from Willis's office to see if she's coordinated with the Department of Justice to indict Trump, and if her office used any federal funds to investigate Trump. What happens if any links between the DA's office and the DOJ are found in their indictments against Trump?
Yeah, and that's a real question, because it seems as though some of the evidence were shared from other cases. That's what it appears to be. And that's why Jim Jordan has started up this investigation, and rightly so. Did they coordinate all the timings of all the indictments? We have 4 indictments. Were they perfectly timed one after the other? Why was done that way? What kind of coordination and what type of evidence sharing might have happened? These are all real questions for Congress, and I'm very happy they're looking into it at this point. Ultimately, the remedy is basically to defund any sort of federal money going into these state DA's offices. That's all they can really do. And is that going to be enough to stop them from prosecuting the Georgia 19? I'm not sure, but I'm very happy that Jim Jordan is looking at this. The other thing that I had heard, and this is something that Bernie Kerik, the former NYPD commissioner, was saying, was that this particular DA is looking for the death penalty. I mean, this is the kind of level we're playing at now. She's seeking the death penalty for Trump and the other 18 indicted for this particular case. Now, tell me that is not just for the media. That's not just the shock and awe kind of narrative that she's trying to drive here. It is a really strange case, and I really do hope that any judge looking at this will just dismiss it, just based on the merits of the case. I think, you know, there's a panel of lawyers here. We've all read the indictment. I don't know how much weight it holds, but I'm very happy that Jim Jordan is going to go full speed on this, because I think that's the only real remedy we have politically, is to look at where the money was going, and perhaps if Jack Smith was involved in this on any level, there's going to be some serious questions raised as to what his role in all of this is, and maybe even traces back to the White House.
So, William, Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan, also requesting similar information from Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. That's after Bragg brought charges against Trump. What happened in that request, and where do you see this ultimately heading?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the status of the request to Bragg is. I know he had objected to it. I know he had gone to court, and I believe he lost in court. I don't know what's been turned over. But those document battles, that could easily be a year. Those things don't get resolved very quickly. So if the government is going to contest and the prosecutors are going to contest that they have to turn over their prosecutorial files and their investigative files, that's going to take a while to be resolved. It's not going to be resolved next month or probably early next year. So that's a fight that's going to go on for a long time. I would not, while the intentions may be very good, I would not hold out a lot of hope that a House committee is going to get anything that's good anytime soon, because if it's good, they're going to fight like crazy to avoid having to turn it over, and it's going to be court fights eventually and appeals. So we're not going to get anything out of those investigations. I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. I think they're well intentioned, and it will create some pressure, but these document fights take a really long time to work out.
David, your thoughts?
Oh, William is exactly right about this. If there's anything good that they have, they're going to fight it tooth and nail. They're going to file motions with every court they possibly can to avoid giving anything of substance to Congress. And, you know, Jim Jordan, what they did today, I think is good. And frankly, it probably should have been done a while ago, because there has to be some type of connection between what Alvin Bragg and Fani Willis are doing and the DOJ. There is no possible way they are coming about doing all this and coming out with all these different charges, especially in Fani Willis's case, without having DOJ input. I wouldn't buy it for a millisecond. These are extremely serious, complex charges that they are charging Trump and all the co-defendants with. These are charges that probably they've never tried in the beginning. They're federal charges for the most part. Georgia has these types of charges because they're based on the federal statutes. However, I can almost guarantee you that 99.9% of the attorneys in the Fulton County District Attorney's Office has never tried a RICO case. And Steve, I also want to bring up about a very interesting point that I was thinking about, where it's always interesting that when there's something happening with Hunter Biden, the next day something happens to Trump. Either he's indicted or there's a motion or something going on, anything to take away from Hunter Biden. So it's very interesting to me. Is it a coincidence? Maybe, but it doesn't sit right to me. Just like everything else that is going on right now with the two district attorneys going after him in state court and not being in cahoots with the DOJ, something just doesn't smell right.
Yeah, David, a lot of people have raised that point. Very curious indeed. And as we could see here, bring our attention back to the screen, former President Trump looks like he's about to take back off to New Jersey, back to his Bedminster estate there. And that's after being arrested and processed in the Fulton County Jail, the notorious Fulton County Jail. Right now, we're going to take it to break, and we will be back with more special coverage in just a moment.
Let's watch NTD News.
$300 million jobs globally could be impacted by artificial intelligence.
TikTok could undermine the very essence of American sovereignty.
It's not about what the companies actually do, it's about playing the game. Where do you see safe spots in the market? Inflation surged the most, 311,000. The largest bank failures, the Twitter files. What's driving up the demand for gold? Joining me right here every weekday for your latest business news.
The stories that need to be told, the voices that need to be heard, the truth that you need to see. Get unbiased and in-depth news. Don't miss a beat. I'm Stephanie Cox. At NTD, we're here for you.
I was formerly a registered Democrat. So our family, my entire family, I had 9 brothers and sisters, and of course my mother and father. We consider ourselves Kennedy Democrats, so JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King. When I was a kid, and I was a young man, we looked at Republicans as the party of the elites, party of wealth, right? The party of the haves, right? When we were looking at ourselves as the party of the workers and the have-nots. But I think Kennedy saw what happened, or what was happening to the Democratic Party, one of them being an overreaching federal government, and the ideals, the true ideals of the Democratic Party. And because he tried to raise those ideals, he was killed for it. Okay, he was assassinated for it. Physical assassinations are much messier these days. And we have a lot of new technologies to be able to learn, the forensics of something that happened, right? Where what is less messy is the assassination by narrative, okay? I'm a product of one of those. I've been assassinated by narrative, yet I'm still standing because I have a much deeper understanding of what it is that we're facing than 95% of just regular people. The tailspin is going to drive us right into the ground, and that's going to be the end of America, and that will be America's demise.
Welcome back to NTD's special live coverage following former President Trump's booking at the Fulton County Jail on his 4th indictment, where the former president was arrested. Joining us, we have Angie Wong, political journalist and columnist, David Gelman, criminal defense attorney, who's also a former deputy district attorney in the state of New Jersey, and William A. Jacobson, clinical professor of law and the director of Securities Law Clinic at Cornell University. Thank you guys for coming back with us. David, I want to go back to you. Obviously, as a former district attorney, I'm sure that you have went through these indictments a lot more closely than many of us lay folks. What stuck out to you as you were reading them? Anything in particular?
Honestly, there was just no meat on the bones. Looking at everything, they're saying that Trump did an overt act. His overt act was saying, go watch this news channel as the Fulton County elections are being held. Go watch this channel. Go watch this. That is not an act of trying to overthrow an election. So reading this indictment, it's like reading a child's book almost. It is laughable. Honestly, it is. It's a disgrace. Now, I'll bring you into the grand jury room real quick for what happens in a grand jury. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the saying, you can indict a ham sandwich. That's pretty true. I did that for 5 years in the grand jury unit. And what it is there's no defense counsel, there's no defendant, there's no defense witnesses. All it is a prosecutor and their witnesses, and they're just giving their side of the story. And the grand jury just votes, and all you need is a majority rule. And if you want to indict something, you can indict it. If you don't want to indict something, I can guarantee you it won't be indicted. It is a mockery what they did and what I read.
William, is there any meat on the bone as you read the Georgia indictment?
Well, like I said, in the Georgia indictment, they do allege certain crimes and things which, if they're true and they're proven beyond a reasonable doubt, would be a crime, like unlawfully trying to access a computer system or impersonating a public official. But so much of that has nothing to do, at least that they've tied in, with Donald Trump. Did he direct that be done? Did he participate in that? Instead, again, I get back to this is basically a RICO theory trying to hold him responsible for what other people did. And that's where I think they're going to have a burden of proof there, assuming there's a fair jury and he gets a fair trial. That's, I think, going to be an uphill battle. And a lot of what they say is that the illegality was that he lied about things. And that's true in the D.C. case also. But lying in and of itself is not a crime. And lying when you're a politician is really a requirement of the job, it seems, for most people. So that's why I'm saying, whether you call it no meat on the bone, or I really feel there's something missing there tying Donald Trump to an act of illegality, there's something missing there. And that's why I think they, in somewhat desperation, fell into this RICO count. Now, this is not what at least I thought and most people thought it was going to be about. Most people, I think, thought it would be about his phone call to the Secretary of State. Well, we have that recording and we have the transcript, and I don't see there's anything illegal there. So this is really, I think, an act of desperation. And as to the timing that was brought up, I think it is very curious, not so much as it ties to Hunter Biden, because that would require even greater coordination with whoever's involved in the Hunter Biden cases, but how these indictments came almost staggered. It almost seemed to me at the time that Jack Smith in D.C. rushed out that indictment so he could beat Fani Willis to the punch, okay? Because everybody knew she'd announced she's going to reach a conclusion by the end of August. So something's very wrong here. All of this, and I've been saying this for a long time, whether you think there's any meat on the bone or not, this should have been done a year ago. It should not be done now.
So as we've been reporting, the former president has just departed the airport in Atlanta. Right before departing, however, he did approach the press and gave a few remarks. Angie, we're going to play this and get your reaction on the other side.
Thank you very much for being here. I really believe this is a very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same thing, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Stacey Abrams or many others. When you have that great freedom to challenge, you have to be able to, otherwise you can have very dishonest elections. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. I've never had such support, and that goes with the other ones too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning, and this is one instance, but you have three other instances. It's election interference. So I want to thank you for being here. We did nothing wrong at all, and we have every right, every single right, to challenge an election that we think is dishonest, that we think is very dishonest. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you very much.
Did you pardon yourself?
So Angie, here we are a day after a highly anticipated, highly watched GOP debate, which the former president did not attend, and he's center stage special coverage on many networks across many platforms right now. Some might argue by design. What does that tell you?
Well, so I was there last night in Wisconsin. I was watching all these guys on stage, and it was funny because they were all wearing the same outfit except for Nikki Haley. But it was interesting to watch because at the end of it, many people were saying, "Well, I think Trump actually won that debate by not being there," and he, did his own platform. It was very smart. It basically took the steam out of Fox, and the reality is this is a fight between Rupert Murdoch and President Trump. The two men are challenging each other to be whoever is the kingmaker of the Republican Party. It used to be Rupert Murdoch for a very long time, and now it seems like the roles have switched. It's now President Trump. And I think that's the fight that we're seeing very publicly at the moment. I think what President Trump, that short statement he made just now, is exactly right. And I also want to add to it, which is, where was the Georgian Republicans in any of this? Why have they been so silent? Where is the Secretary of State? Where is the governor? Where is any of the Congress members? Where's Marjorie Taylor Greene in all this? It's really strange that they've been so silent all day today. I would have been out there up front talking to reporters and being supportive of the president, because clearly this is all politics. It's wrapped up in lawfare, and we're watching all of this unfold. But meanwhile, the representatives of our own party, they're just not there. They're completely quiet and staying out of it. And I think that is very, very telling. I would like to hear from them.
And as you speak here, we're watching the former president's plane taxi on the runway here as it's getting ready to take off and head out of Georgia. Right now, it's picking up some steam, and it's about to take off back to New Jersey, where the former president lives 6 months out of the year. And as you can see right now on your screen, that's him right there taking off. David, to Angie's point, what effect do you think this will ultimately have on the 2024 race? David?
Do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I think this is going to have a tremendous effect on the race, honestly. And frankly, I think it's probably good for President Trump. I know it's a weird thing to say, but, and people being indicted 4 times probably aren't very happy about it. But this is almost like a rallying cry for Trump supporters. And also, I really feel that the American people, just reading different things on Twitter and online, people, even if you don't like Trump, you can see that a lot of these indictments that are being thrown at him are for political reasons only. If this was for anybody else, this probably wouldn't be happening. Just like President Trump said earlier, Hillary Clinton, nothing happened to her. Hunter Biden, he's getting a slap on the wrist right now. That may change. Joe Biden, who knows what's going to happen, but nothing has happened so far. So he is really the only political persecutor, if you will, that this has happened to. And I really feel that the campaign is going to go through the roof because of this. Look at last night, what happened. There was a debate. He wasn't on. He was on another channel, and he got a ton more coverage than the actual debate itself. So just showing all these things, and then today what's happening is nobody's even talking about the debates because President Trump is taking all the air out of the room with this indictment and turning himself in. I can't think that this is going to actually be bad for him, as crazy as that sounds.
William, I want to turn our attention to former President Trump's release conditions from the Fulton County jail, where he just was arrested. We know that Trump has agreed to a $200,000 bond, but this bond document also includes terms that he has to follow, including he shall make no direct or indirect threat against any co-defendant, witness, victim, or the community. The order adds that the above includes posts on social media, which we know that the former president is fond of and can sometimes use some inflammatory language. How would these terms, especially the specific restriction on social media, affect the way Trump might truth?
Yeah, well, it's obviously he's got to be very careful because he is not somebody who is used to keeping his opinion to himself, to put it bluntly. and he has a platform at Truth Social where he, rages and all caps and exclamation points, and it's very entertaining. But if he names anybody who's a witness in any of his rants, he could have a real problem. And so he's got to be very careful. On this political point, I think you really need to distinguish the politics of it from the criminal process. That, as unpleasant as I assume anybody would be going through a criminal process, as was just indicated, this has been a boon to the Trump campaign. That if you look at the Real Clear Politics charts and the averages, this was a race that was tightening between DeSantis and Trump, such that by mid-March, right before Alvin Bragg's indictment, there was only about a 12 or 13 point difference between the two. Alvin Bragg drops his indictment, all of a sudden Trump's up 35 points, and he hasn't looked back since. And he has widened that, not because he's gained more success, more support, but DeSantis has gone down. So Trump has milked these for everything there is. His fundraising, there were many reports before the Alvin Bragg campaign indictment that his campaign was running out of money. And they raised then $35 million within a matter of days. So Trump has expertly exploited these indictments. And I think the question is going to be, is that going to continue? Because if you look at the fundraising numbers his campaign has released, and I'm maybe off in the exact numbers, but I'm not off in proportionality. It was, I think, $30 million after the first, and then it was, $10 million after the second, and then they waited weeks to release the third, and I don't think they've released any numbers about the fourth. So while there absolutely has been a surge of rally around support for Trump, I wonder how long that's going to last. As people move into November and December and start voting in January, is there going to be a fatigue where people are going to say, look, he's being treated wrongly, he's being treated unfairly, but we just can't win with him. And so I don't know that the political part has been written yet.
Angie, to William's point in taking the politics out of this, other co-defendants were also subject to similar terms, but only Trump's bond document explicitly listed out examples of acts that would violate that order. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, Trump not tweeting, that's going to be a major problem. He's got surrogates. He's got lots of surrogates and proxies ready to go to spread the message. So I'm not so worried, even if it's not coming directly from his account. Certainly, he can get his message out there. I think that all of this, I think Trump is actually kind of enjoying this. You can see that he's quite relaxed. Even on his on the tarmac just now, he was very relaxed in his speech. He just got arrested again, right? I mean, 4 times this year, and he looks like he's about to go for a cocktail. I know he doesn't drink, but he was very relaxed around. I love that because you can tell he is enjoying himself. He is campaigning. This is his campaign. He knows that little 15-second clip is going to be played over and over again all night long. It's going to hit the evening news, and it's going to be played around the world because everyone is watching this election going, what is the U.S. doing? It is just insane. And I certainly can tell you that, I used to be a former news editor in Hong Kong. Everyone there is watching. It's going to be on the front page of the South China Morning Post tomorrow because it's so ridiculous, because now we're mimicking we used to criticize China. We used to criticize all these other countries, and we're doing it ourselves. So we're going to be hypocrites tomorrow on the world's media.
Speaking of clips that go viral around the world, there was one from last night's debate I'd like to pull up and get your reaction, David, where all of the candidates were asked whether or not they would support the former president, even if he was to be convicted. David?
It's very interesting. And don't they have to support the eventual nominee? Wasn't that how they got onto the stage? There wasn't anything about, well, if he's indicted, are you still going to support him? So I found it very interesting, especially Chris Christie. Being a New Jersey guy, I know Chris Christie, not personally, but I know his politics, and I know people that do know him and stories about him and what he's done. And it doesn't surprise me at all how he acted last night, especially with this type of question. I do want to jump back to Angie's point, though, if I could, just for a second, regarding how Trump acted today. It was very interesting to me. He did act, he was very calm, cool, collected. I've been in court many times with defendants where they are shaking in their boots, if you will. They're very scared. They don't know what's going on because, of course, they're not attorneys. They wouldn't have any idea what the process is like. And I know Trump doesn't know what the process is like, but I'm sure he was prepared for it. He just seemed cool. And I think it's just something about him where he knows in his heart, I guess, that this is all, going to go away eventually. And that, yeah, this is probably good for his campaign. In fact, I was at Trump Bedminster about a week ago or a week and a half ago when they had the Live event. And I actually was golfing in the Pro-Am, and Trump was there pretty much on the fairway right next to me. And I saw a shot that he made, great shot. He gave a thumbs up. I actually hit a shot right after him. He saw it, and he's clapping. He's a fan. He's not has a care, nothing like a care in the world. So in my opinion, he's having a great time here, and it's very unlike any defendant I've ever seen before.
William, to David and Angie's point, Trump does appear to be calm, cool, and collected. However, he has 19 co-defendants. Nobody knows what they're thinking. I can imagine this is not a pleasant experience with a lot of stress. To that point, does this create a chilling effect on people in his orbit, potential future staff, current staff, and, say, other legal counsel?
Yes, and if this reminds me a lot of what happened in Wisconsin with the so-called John Doe investigations starting in 2010. They went on for several years. They used a secretive investigative tool, a local Democrat prosecutor, to basically freeze the entire conservative movement in Wisconsin, because they would investigate people, they would raid their homes, they would get court orders that the target of the raid was not allowed to tell anybody that it had taken place. And people stopped talking to each other because they didn't know who was being monitored, who was being investigated, who they could get in trouble from speaking to. And so I think one of the chilling effects, particularly of the Georgia indictment, is an attempt to freeze the Trump movement, to freeze the Trump wing of the party. That's not really true in the D.C. case, which is for the same act of alleged unlawful election interference, where they named one person, Donald Trump. This is an attempt, and I think one of the panelists mentioned this earlier, this is an attempt to take down Trump World and to freeze Trump World. And I think that's what makes it so political. She didn't have to name 19 people. She could have brought some of these discrete, supposedly criminal charges, like accessing a computer improperly, as a separate case 18 months ago, 2 years ago. Instead, it is an attempt to take down a political movement and to get people to stop talking to each other, and now to get some key political players worried about what they might tweet or put on Truth Social. So that has a really bad taste. Even if you think Donald Trump did something wrong, it shouldn't have been done this way to prosecute him in Georgia, the way they're doing it.
So I want to actually bring up, I'm getting word right now, we have the official mugshot of the former president. We've received it from the Fulton County District Attorney. There you have it, first reaction. I remember the first time the former president was indicted and arraigned in Manhattan. We had that image, but we did not have a mugshot. That's a pretty serious look on his face right there. Former president's first mugshot out of 4 indictments. It's a pretty powerful photograph right there. Angie, what's your first reaction?
I'm very sad for our country right now. This is the first time our country has ever indicted a U.S. president, and it's a very, very chilling moment. I was making fun of these images. I think these images are going to be part of our fabric in our experience as an American, because of I've just been seeing a lot of it online with the other mugshots. I think this one in particular, unfortunately, we have half the country who's popping champagne bottles looking at this image, and the other half of the country is crying for him. I certainly feel a lot of sadness to see this. I don't think it should have ever been brought to this point. I also know that President Trump intentionally posed that way because that's who he is. And he is going to basically build a T-shirt empire off selling that image, right? he's going to game this one. So I have no doubt that this is, he knew this was coming, and that this is going to be an image just like the Frank Sinatra, mugshot, and any of the other, kind of iconic images that we have as Americans. And I'm just really sad for him today. But I know that in the end, he's going to play this one. He's going to game it. It's going to be the election T-shirt. I already see the slogan. It's going to say, they're not coming after me. They're coming after you. I'm just in the way. And this particular photo.
David, your reaction?
I have two thoughts. Number one, it was unnecessary to take a mugshot. There's no law that says you have to have a mugshot when you are charged or when you post bail. So they did this strictly for publicity, as we spoke about yesterday, Steve. All publicity. Fannie Willis did this on purpose. I think it's going to backfire. The second thing I'm thinking is, cha-ching, this is going to make Trump and the campaign a ton of money because, again, like we were saying earlier, there's going to be T-shirts, there's going to be posters, there's going to be flags. It's going to be everywhere. By the time this is all done, people are going to be sick of that photo, I got a feeling. It's a good photo, I think. It showed strength. It looks like he's not messing around, and I think it's going to be a rallying cry, if anything. But, in all seriousness, I think it is a sad day. I think it's a very sad and something that really was unnecessary, and it's all publicity.
William, we'll give you a final thought here and your reaction to that photograph. First look.
Yeah, I had more of a reaction than I thought I was going to have, to tell you the truth. And it is, as the other panelists, it's a reaction of sadness. It's not, I've never hesitated to criticize Donald Trump. I criticized his conduct after the campaign, but I don't approve of criminalizing politics, and seeing this mugshot, so you know how it's going to be celebrated on MSNBC and, on the left-wing politicians. It's really sad. It's really sad that it's come to that, and it shouldn't be. And there's no reason they needed to have a mugshot. It's just an attempt to humiliate him like they've done 8 million times before. And I think it will backfire on them. I think that it's just very strange seeing that mugshot. It's not the reaction I thought I was going to have.
Angie, just real quick, we've talked about the international implications. What do you think the cadres in the Chinese Communist Party are thinking when they see this photograph?
Oh, wow. What are they thinking? I mean, they've been watching this, and I wonder how much of it that, it mirrors a lot of what's happening in these communist countries, right? I was a reporter in Hong Kong and in China. This happens all day long there, and it's almost out of a playbook. So now we're going to be, now we have to be very careful, because I do wonder, as an American, where we are right now. What are we doing as Americans? Are we going to allow this to continue to take place after Donald Trump? They could be coming after for all sorts of things. You can be accused of all sorts of things. And you know what? It's left for you to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend yourself, both in the public as well as in the courts. And that is what I'm seeing. And I have chills thinking about this, because I think we're all of reasonable mind here, and we all can see what this is. Not only is it election interference, this is a real kind of play for what is truth. And where's that line where, we have to defend ourselves? Are we slipping into some kind of quasi-communist state? I mean, if we're going to allow the DOJ and our state attorneys to do this to American citizens, and not fight back now, I just don't know how much power we're giving up. And that's why we're all here speaking about this.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much to our expert panel. Excellent analysis and perspective. Angie Wong, David Gelman, William A. Jacobson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And this does conclude our special coverage of former President Trump surrendering in Fulton County, Georgia. NTD and the Epoch Times will be following all of these cases closely, as well as the 2024 race for the White House. I want to thank you for watching tonight, and remember to always seek the truth. Good night. NTD's Capitol Report. It's about getting answers, cutting through the fog of politics. It's about your questions and our chances to ask.
What is the net impact of the American Congressman Graves? Thank you for joining us.
We're speaking to those in power to find out what does this mean for the people. We're here so you're in the know.